Well, welcome, welcome, welcome. It's Thursday, noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. That's Robert Hilliard. I'm Whitney Wiley, and we want to thank you for joining us for the State of Leadership Simple and Beyond. This is our opportunity to talk with you about what's happening in leadership in organizations here, there, and all around the world. So, how's it going, Robert?
It's going well. Thank you. Thank you so much for asking. And I'm excited.
This is one of my favorite topics.
Mhm.
We're going to be talking about employee development and some of the things that I've been seeing. I work with lots of clients who are in the process of making career transitions, leaving one job, going to another, whether it's an industry to industry change, just a job, trying to look for promotions and others. And so I'm talking to them frequently. I'm paying attention to what's in job announcements and what's going on. And talk about training and development is highlighted. But when you ask employees what they are getting from their employee development, not really getting a lot of positives from a lot of places. So some organizations, of course, are doing it well. Others are not, which is generally the case with just about everything,
Sure.
right? And so we wanted to talk today about employee development, what it is, why it's important, how you can do it better. And if you're on the other side, if you're an employee, some of the things that you can look for, that you can ask for, that can help you in the process of being developed, right? So, employee development, sort of at its core for employees, is about investment, right? It's your employer investing in you. And so there are two sides of that coin. It's the employer's investment, and then there is your investment in yourself, and you're standing up for yourself to get what you need, not only to do your current job, but looking down the line at future jobs. So, any opening thoughts or comments?
Well, just some things come to mind about why employee development is important. And a lot of times organizations are a little reluctant to really push that forward, but it can help organizations in a lot of ways. And of course, it can help the employees. It can help with retention. It can help with morale. It can help with employee growth. It can do a lot of things. It can help the organization when it comes to their future goals, like succession planning. It can help give them a competitive edge. So there's a lot of pluses to having a really good employee development program in your organization.
Absolutely. And so, just at its core, reiterating what Robert said, it is professional development, and it's a process of improving existing skills, developing new ones, and growing the knowledge of the employee in support of the company's goals and the employee's goals. And I think that's one of the things that's really important. But it's not just about skill set, it's about learning over time. It is an investment by the company. It's also an investment in your employee, not just now, but for the future. And some of the comments that I've heard is, why would we invest in developing employees? Because if we do that, what if they leave? And the response is, what if you don't? Right? If they're going to leave, they're going to leave. And so one of the things that you can do is give them one less reason to,
And,
to
and plus
go.
the research doesn't back their argument. In fact,
Exactly.
it shows the opposite. When you invest in your employees, they're more apt to stay than to leave. But we'll get to that. I have some thoughts about that too.
So, well, on that line, it's like, let's say you have, let's just look at a scenario. You have an employee that has limited skills. There are two options for that, right? You can let them go. So your recruitment, the hiring, the onboarding, and all that you've done up until this point, that goes out the window, right? If they go. But if you develop their skills, because you've already made investment, that's the sort of the fallacy in the argument, is as if you don't do this additional thing that you're going to be good. You've already made investment, right? The recruitment process is an investment. The training for them to just do their job is an investment. So why not look at it as a whole, which is what I will talk about a little bit later, sort of laying out the way I see it. But you're already making an investment. So how about being intentional with the investment that you're making? It's going to cost your company money either way, but at least if you have an employee development program, a process with intentionality, and I know that this is something that you'll want to talk about, with intentionality, with an end in mind, right? That it will make all the difference in the world. And it does all the things that you've talked about. Candidates are using whether or not a company has an employee development program as part of their calculus, as part of their considerations when they have job offers. It improves employee engagement. It improves retention, right? Some studies say that 70% of employees would leave a job for a company that actually invests in them. So if you're not investing in them and someone else will, I think that speaks for itself. There are benefits both to the employee and the employer, and there are benefits to the immediate manager, right? So you may have to spend more time proactively developing your programs, your employees, but you'll spend less time addressing performance and attitude issues, less time on discipline, and less time replacing people because they're leaving because you're not investing in them.
Yeah, I think a lot of people that are in charge of really conceptualizing or thinking about these programs, sometimes they forget that when an employee leaves, right, like you said, you've invested all that time training them. That's actually money, and it can cost you twice that person's salary to recruit, to get somebody in, to train them. Not all the time, but it can cost that much, and so they lose sight of that. I think the other thing is, many times, like, for example, we have this, we're talking about this on the show. If somebody sees this and they're in a position where they can say, okay, well, I'm going to, put this forth in my organization, and we're going to start thinking about having an employee development program. It shouldn't be just to do it. It should have an end goal for your organization. It should be tied into your strategy. It should be tied into your goals as an organization. So it's not just okay, this is the flavor of the month type of thing to do. Let's do it because I heard somebody talk about it and institute it in our organization, without an end goal. You have to have an end goal if you're going to be successful.
Absolutely. And so I like to think about it, I said holistically earlier, that it's not a self-contained, or is certainly not a one-off, right? But this is part of an overall strategy, is the word that you use. So your organization has a strategic plan. I counsel my clients that you've got the organizational plan. There should be department or unit strategic plans. Within the strategic plan, there should be hiring plans. You've got succession plans. You've got all these components that work together to ultimately help your organization do what it is trying to do. And when you bring it down to the level of the employee development plan, as Robert said, what is it that you're trying to do? Part of it is succession planning. Part of it is retention. There are all kinds of things that you are looking to do. And it's not just training. So I'll just put this out there. I look at this as sort of a three-legged stool. the actual employee development portion of the bigger picture of how you are working with and retaining your employees. But this three-legged stool is training, coaching, and mentoring, right? So you've got these three parts. I think a lot of companies get the training part, they understand that part, and they get it as it relates to the job that the employee has in this moment. But there are other trainings and there are different kinds of trainings, right? So it's not just the training of the job that they're doing, but acquiring other skill sets. So training is about acquisition of skill sets, and it's generally focused on the specific skills needed to do the job, do the particular job that the employee has. And so an example might be someone, if you've got a secretary or an admin assistant or something, making sure that they have the right skills, the computer skills, word skills. Someone who's in manufacturing, knowing how to operate machinery. A trainer, or maybe it is someone in your communications department or managers, how to deliver speeches, learning company procedures and processes, whatever the specific duties and responsibilities for the job is, making sure that they are trained well, and not just that, but staying up to date with those skills. And so I'll share an example for an organization that I used to work for. I did not work in this area of the organization, but it impacted my area and all the other employees, and it had to do with IT. And we had an IT department that was not particularly up to date with what was happening in the market, but the tools and the resources that employees needed to do their jobs, the things that I needed to do my job, right, were not readily available. And part of it was that they were not being trained and kept up to date of what was going on in the marketplace, what products were available. And so it became easier to just sort of band-aid the things that we had rather than upgrade systems. And so you have to look at not only how it impacts the person or the employee that you're looking to train, but how it has a ripple effect with other employees throughout your organization.
It's funny how we've been working together for so long that we segue into each other's thoughts, but because the next thing on my speaking brain list is what really is what is good employee development, right? And the first thing that I think about, it should be systemic, that it doesn't just end with that employee's job, that it ripples out, that it touches their department, that it touches the entire organization. So what they're doing is not just enhancing their skills, but it's enhancing everybody's ability to do their jobs better. That's the first thing that comes to mind. The other thing, and Whitnie, this is one of those things that I don't think that anybody really talks about enough, is that when you have an employee development program, there needs to be a clear path to eligibility. People need to know what they need to do to be eligible. Whether it's mandated, everybody has to go through it, or it's some kind of employee, tuition reimbursement program, whatever it is, it needs to be very clear, and it needs to be distributed in an equitable manner. That's really important too. And sometimes we forget that's those logistical things. The third thing is that it needs to be varied, like you said. It shouldn't just be one intervention, as I like to call them. It shouldn't just be coaching. It shouldn't just be training. It shouldn't just be mentoring, but a combination. And I like to throw in that formal education in the training bucket, just to make sure it's varied, that you're hitting employees and your employee development program from different angles. And then I think the last thing is that it needs to be supported beyond the actual event. That when you have a training course, it shouldn't be, you shouldn't be just doing it to say, okay, we had a training course. This person learned skills. They got a break from their job, which is, Not really the case, because when you say that, you're pulling somebody away from their desk and they're not even present in the training because all that work is still piling up. So it needs to be supported. So they're learning skills that they can start putting to use right away. Their manager should be sitting down with them and saying, listen, let's talk about what you learned in the training. I'm briefed on it because I've talked to the training department. I know what you went to get educated on.
Yeah.
How are we going to apply that to the job you're doing now? And where is this going to take you? So it needs to be supported beyond the actual event.
Absolutely. So, and you said something sort of like, you could look at it, training could be about right now, whereas the development, which is, we're talking about the bigger picture. Development is about the long term, and it's about helping the employee grow as an individual and having that person's development be part of the bigger picture development of the organization as a whole, right? So if you've got this happening with all your employees, they're all bringing that back to help the organization grow. And you made such a good point about allocation of resources and paying attention to that. I'll mention another organization that I worked for. There was and this is real, right? Finances are limited resources for most organizations. And that includes development budgets, training budgets. But you've got to have a budget that's realistic, or you might as well not do it at all. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. So there was a budget that, when you did the math, basically boiled down to about $200 per person. Mm. There's not a lot. There's not a lot that you can do with that. And this was years ago, right? This is not even in today's dollars. This was years ago. Mm-hmm. So you can't, if you're going to have it, you've got to be realistic with what you are putting into it. And you can be creative about how you go about allocating those resources, those dollars, and whether or not you are sending people out to organizations, or you are bringing trainers in, or you are having training done in-house. And one of the things that I did to help us actually grow and keep the employees that were junior to me was to develop in-house training. All right. I took it upon myself. I asked my boss about it and developed some in-house training. So it didn't cost anything except our time, right? It took the time it took me to develop the training, and then the time that it took for us to do the training. But it made a huge difference for the junior employees in terms of helping them know that someone cared about their growth and their future and their potential future contribution to that organization by having the knowledge that went beyond their current job. And it was about helping them to develop, to basically replace me someday. That was the goal. Right. That everyone should be prepared for the next level if that was something that they wanted. And it just so happened in that case, it was.
Very good. I think that it's really important to, like we talked about earlier, what's the purpose of employee development? Why are you doing it? And with that, I have a list of do's and don'ts. Because I had like you, I've worked with organizations that just, some did it well, others did not do it so well. So the first thing, I'll start with the do's first. You want to support it beyond the actual intervention. I mentioned that before. Yeah. It's so important that I'm saying it again, that you really need to tie whatever it is they're doing to their jobs and let them know how it's going to impact the organization. Now with that, it needs to be connected to the employee's job. So support it, connected to their jobs. The next thing, it needs to be connected to the organization's mission, vision, and values. That's really important too. So they know that what they're doing is not just staying in their department. It's not just staying with them. It's radiating out, and they can see that it's impacting the organization on a whole. That's really important. The next thing is celebrate it. And I don't know too many organizations that actually celebrate it. They'll say that we have this program. They're not really celebrating it, but they should celebrate it. Make it a big deal. That's really important. Make it a big deal. And then the last thing is measure it. See exactly where your dollars are going. Make sure you're doing that, getting that return on the investment, because you are investing, you're putting money in. You want to make sure you're getting that return on your investment. So measure your employee development efforts.
I love that. I trained for a national training organization, and a couple of weeks ago was delivering a training about collaboration. And I'm asking the attendees why they are there and what they hope to learn. And one of the people in my class was saying that all of the employees in their managers, their supervisors group were in different training. And what they were going to do was have them all come back and over time share the things that they learned, so that all of them were getting the benefit of what they were learning. But it wasn't just that we're sending you out to get training, right? The way that the managers was making sure they were paying attention was to have them come back and teach it.
And
right?
that's a very cost-effective way to share knowledge and to teach other people. And you know what? I almost forgot to do my don'ts. I got so excited about the do's. But I wanted to talk about what you just said. That's amazing, because that really ties in and makes sure, like you said, everyone's paying attention. But it also is a cost-effective way, like I said, to make sure that other people are getting the knowledge. They won't get the depth of knowledge that other people got, but they'll get some of it.
And they may end up taking, all of them may end up taking the training all around, or you learn something and say, oh, I'd really like to go for that training myself.
Yeah.
But at least what you're getting out of that is people that are invested, and they know that it's not just about them, right? If I'm in a class and I know it's not just about me learning, and especially with virtual training, how easy is it to turn your computer off and not really be paying attention? But there's this accountability piece that was tied to it that I thought went along well with your dues, right?
Yeah,
which is now you've got this accountability piece that will help to establish some of the ROI that comes along with the investment on the training.
That's great. So let me continue by talking about the don'ts. So one of the don'ts, my very first one, is don't do training or any kind of employee development just to do it. I worked for an organization. One of the very first, I'm laughing because it was humorous. One of the very first meetings I had with my then boss was, so I asked, so how are we measuring the training that I am, the story, that I'm creating and I'm delivering? And he said, no, we're not going to measure it. We're just doing it just to do it. And I was like, that's ridiculous. I'm not going to do that. This is it's a waste of your money. It's a waste of, my time, money. We're pulling people out of their offices for, 6.5, 8 hours,
right,
for things that they're not even going to use, just because, this person, wanted to make themselves look good and, for their boss. Look at all the trainings that I've done, throughout the year. This is what we can deliver, with no tie-in to their jobs, no way of measuring it. So that was not very good. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to engage in flavor of the month interventions. I've seen all kinds of things. I worked in an organization where the CEO had just finished doing Six Sigma, and then, pulled me in and said, I want you to train everybody in Six Sigma. I said, first of all, I'm not certified in Six Sigma. I am not certified to train Six Sigma. It was just a flavor of the month. They went through that training, they liked it, and said, let's just do it, in the organization. I've seen the same thing with coaching. When coaching started to, build some steam and get more popular, organizations were like, well, let's do coaching. But to what end? How are you, what are you using coaching for? And then the last don't discourage employee growth. There's some organizations that don't want their employees to go. I worked in an organization. This was at a different capacity. I was doing some recruiting. I've worn many hats, and I was working with a manager that didn't have a whole lot of education, and they were discouraging their employees from engaging or participating in tuition reimbursement, actively, thwarting them because they didn't want someone who worked under them to have more education. And it really, came to a head when I was recruiting for a position, and that person didn't want anybody that had a master's degree. So I would give this person reams of resumes, and they would just strike through them. And I'd be like, well, tell me why you don't want to bring this person in. And they really couldn't tell me. So I ended up having to go to their, boss, who was like, this is ridiculous. I'll just do the hiring myself. And so he hired someone that had more education than they did. So you don't want to discourage it. You really want to encourage those folks in your organization who work for you to improve their knowledge, skill, and abilities, because the whole organization is going to benefit from it, and you'll benefit as their manager as well.
Along with that, sort of your do's and don't list, and as you are making determinations about what does and doesn't align with your organization, I would counsel to have a broad lens for that, not have it be too narrow, but to have a broad lens, because we know, particularly over the last 2 years, that, it reinforced. I think research had shown this way before March 2020, but the happy employees, right? Employees who are invested in, employees who are challenged are more productive employees. They are, when they're happy in their lives. And so when you are looking at the kinds of trainings that they may come to you, maybe it does not make sense for you to send someone off to a cordon bleu course, right? Because no matter how you stretch it or get creative in your thinking, you can't get there from here. But if something is a little, you're a technology company, and someone is looking for a class that helps them communicate better, but their job is to sit and code all day, right? And you may not see how that is a good match. Look at it in the broader lens of not just, again, about the job that they're doing. Everyone can benefit from better communication, better relationships, better emotional intelligence, leadership skills, even if they are not in a position of leadership right now, right? There are certain kinds of skills, soft skills that we tend to call them, that will benefit absolutely everyone in their jobs now and into the future. And so be open to being broad-minded about what it is you're saying yes and no to, and not so narrow that you're like, this doesn't have anything to do with their job. Therefore, we're saying no.
Yeah, and I think a great way to look at that are, what are the basic skills that all employees need to have? If it's communication, it makes total sense that someone who's working in coding knows how to communicate. If they have ideas, they need to be able to articulate those ideas so that people that know nothing about technology can understand them. So maybe they need to persuade someone. Maybe they, whatever it is that they need to do down the line. Learning to communicate better is only going to benefit that employee, regardless of what their job skills, what their job description says.
And what are you looking at them to do, or potential available positions down the line, right? Succession planning should not be limited to C-suite.
Right.
You should be looking at opportunities for your employees to grow into other positions if that is what they're interested in, which requires you to take the time to know what they're interested in, right? We ask some of those questions in the interview and then they never get asked again. You do your annual reviews, if you do them at all. You're talking about what they did last year, what they did well. There should be a component that's about future goals, that's about the future in your organization, where they see themselves fitting in. And then putting together a plan, a development plan that helps to move them in that direction. And so, again, it's not just about the job that they're in right now. You've got to start there, of course, because you need them to do what you hired them to do. But it should be part of a broader vision and a broader plan for them fitting in not just the department, but where they can be of greatest benefit to the organization as a whole. And if at all possible, you're looking at always hiring maybe at the entry level, and you're developing your employees so that they can move up and out throughout the organization. It helps with institutional knowledge, consistency, and so many other things that if you are always just every time someone leaves, you've got to replace, you lose some of the benefit again of the investment that you've already made.
Yeah, I mean, break up those silos. You know, there's so many organizations they're so siloed, and they have, and the people that department heads, I should say, they are so, I don't want to say stingy, but very guarded in the knowledge, with the knowledge and the people that work in those departments, that they're very reluctant to let those folks go out and apply for other positions in the organization. They take it personally when someone wants to do that, and so break up those silos, because the whole organization will benefit from people moving around and, like you say, sharing that organizational institutional knowledge.
I will say this: we spend a lot of time talking about organizations that don't do things well, because there's so much to be learned there. But there are things to be learned from organizations that do this well. And I have worked with, I didn't work for, but I worked with an organization, very large company, global company, that their approach is they've got employees moving every 18 months to 2 years, right? So they're constantly growing. And it is for the purpose of ultimately having them land somewhere that works for them, right? They're working towards something. And in the midst, they're getting to know what's happening throughout the organization, which means they're constantly learning and growing. The one downside of that is that if you're forced to move, and the timing is such that just when you're starting to be productive in that job, in that role, you're now being moved to somewhere else, right? So there's a balancing act that has to happen in there, but the willingness, what I really loved about them was the willingness to continuously be investing in the employees, not letting them get stagnant in a job, constantly encouraging them to look down the line, to look across the organization, and not just, we hired you for this, this is where you're going to stay until you leave and go somewhere else. So
yeah, that kind of experience is really good when you have special projects that come cross department, across functional projects that happen when people benefiting from the knowledge that they gained in those departments that they are no longer working in. They know what those departments can do, how they can contribute, where the strengths are in those departments, where the weaknesses are in those. So I really like that approach. It probably wouldn't work for every organization,
no.
but it is a really good approach, because you can see how they're learning things, they're gaining that knowledge, and they're taking that knowledge as they're working within that organization to what the new department that they are working for.
And I think that point, you didn't say this explicitly, but the point it was made, you need to know your organization, right? You've got to understand your organization, what's good for your department, what's good for units, what's good for employees, the organization as a whole, which ties back to the strategic plan. It ties into your strategic plan for the unit and the department that you are responsible for. Your hiring, your succession planning, all of that, it goes back to that. And if you don't know where you're going, then anywhere will do. And so having that knowledge and being really familiar with what your organization is doing becomes extremely important as you are considering how to do this. So you've given your do's and your don'ts. Any final words you'd like to share as we wrap up?
Oh my goodness. No, not really. You know, I don't want to complicate it with adding more stuff. I think we've given people just a really good, concise taste of what good employee development and what bad employee development looks like. So I think the last thing I will say this: make sure that you really know your end game is with employee development. You really need to know that. If there's one thing, know what you're hoping to achieve by instituting or supporting your employee development efforts in your organization. That's the one thing I will say.
Awesome. So, I want to leave with this, that it's important for you to understand what your employees are capable of. They do need to understand the job that they have. They need to do the job that they have. But they also need to grow beyond the job that they have. And this is a partnership. It's a partnership between you and your employees to find the right path, the right tools, the right resources, the right mix, right? So we talked about this three-legged stool. It's training, it's mentoring, it's coaching. It's not to do them in and of themselves, but to have an end goal in mind. And whether you are doing it where, your employees are learning cross-training and doing cross-functional job in preparing for those opportunities or not, it's something that you do in concert with them. You don't do this in a vacuum, and you don't do it just because. So it's important that there be evaluation about what's going on so that you can measure how it's going, so that you can measure your ROI, and then design a program that makes sense for your organization. The tools, the resources, that financial time and otherwise that you have. Look at the opportunities internally, externally, bringing someone in if need be. All of those things are available to you, and it just takes you sort of taking the time to have a vision for what it is that you want and how you can help your employees get where they're trying to go, so that you can get the best out of them, so that you can get ultimately the best for your organization. So with that, we want to thank you for joining us for this week's The State of Leadership, Simple and Beyond. We are here every Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific. If you've got a topic that you would like for us to cover, send us a message. We'd love to cover that for you. And again, thank you. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next time. Take care.